These words attributed to Lao Tzu. Water is fluid, soft, and yielding. But water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong. Everywhere we look, we can see the power of water, the power of that which is almost softest. This building here at 2125 Chestnut Street is built, I believe, from sandstone, from blocks of sandstone stacked high atop each other, this ceiling held up by massive hammer beams that are made of wood. And what I know about sandstone is that liquid magma deep in the earth was sent up to become mountains made of solid igneous rock, and there they encountered the soft, slow forces of water and air and life. And slowly, these solid rocks would wear away or crumble, making their way down the streams and rivers to eventually become sand. Sand was then covered by more sand and compressed slowly to become rock again, to become sandstone. Stone that carries the memory of the power of water within it. And our hammer beams were once giant trees who drew from a tiny seed, drew water into their roots and into the pores of their leaves for hundreds of years in order to build their giant trunks. Trees which needed water to survive, but whose substance came more from the air that they breathe, the carbon dioxide that their leaves took in, than from the water sipped by their roots or the nutrients in the soil. And our own human bodies, these bodies that invent, that build, bodies that love, bodies that struggle, our own bodies are 55 to 60% water. When we think about what is sturdy and what lasts, what is strongest, we might think of rocks and hardwoods and mountains. This is part of why this wisdom that's attributed to this character called Lao Tzu was something like 2,500 years ago, continues to resonate with us and maybe resonates more today than it ever has. We think about sturdiness and rigidity as being one. And because humankind has had more physical power over our environments than ever before, I wonder if that makes us maybe more delusional than we've ever been before, believing that we have ultimate power, that we can maintain control. But if anything, this week of earthquakes and eclipses and April snowstorms across the Northeast tell us that all of our brain power and our horsepower and our willpower are no match for the greater strength of our planet. The strength found in fluidity and flexibility, the power of water and air and life and sun and motion. If you take one of the world's fastest elevators to the top of one of the world's tallest skyscrapers, you will discover a giant golden 1,455,051 pound ball hanging in its center. It's made of steel. It's painted gold. This is the Taipei 101 building in Taipei, Taiwan. It's a super tall skyscraper. It is 1,671 feet tall, which is roughly 1.5 times the height of our tallest building here in Philadelphia, the Comcast Technology Center at 18th and Arch. The Taipei 101 building had to be designed to withstand typhoons as well as earthquakes, as it was built just 600 feet from a fault line. So its architects and its engineers created what is now known as a tuned mass damper to hang at the building's center. It's this giant golden ball suspended from thick metal cables between the 87th and the 92nd floor. The ball serves essentially as a pendulum within the building, so that when the force of high winds beat at the outside or when an earthquake shakes the building from below, the pendulum absorbs the kinetic energy and begins to swing in the middle of the building, which in turn helps the building itself return to stability much faster than it would otherwise. There's even a mascot for the building, the damper baby, which is this cartoon character that has a giant ball for a head that's supposed to look like the mass tune damper, the ball that hangs between the 87th and the 92nd floor. You can get like a little bobblehead, that's the damper baby. You can watch cartoons that are made about the damper baby. And some of you have heard me preach about this building and about the damper baby before. But given today's service theme, and both the earthquake in Taiwan and the earthquake here in Philly this past week, it felt relevant to preach about it again. Engineers credit this tuned mass damper with the reason that this massive skyscraper survived the earthquake in Taiwan this past week. And I've been trying to wrap my brain around what it would mean for that scale of an earthquake to hit that high of a building. The Richter scale that measures earthquake strength is a logarithmic scale. I'm getting really science and mathy today, which you guys know I don't do very often, so I hope the sciencey mathy ones of you appreciate it, and everybody else, just think about a cartoon damper baby. The Richter scale that measures an earthquake is logarithmic, which means that each whole number higher on the earthquake scale means the earthquake is 10 times stronger than the one step lower. So the 7.2 Taiwan earthquake was over 100 times stronger than the 4.81 that we felt here this past week. Does that make sense? It wasn't 2 times higher. It wasn't going from 5 to 7. It was going 100 times stronger. So imagine that, if you felt it this week, and then the next time you're outside with a view of the Philly skyline, take a look at the tallest skyscraper you can see and imagine it half again as tall as it is. And then imagine being high up in that building when an earthquake 100 times the strength of the one that we felt this week hit. The skyscraper was undamaged. It was undamaged. And I am sure it was terrifying to be in that skyscraper, because surely they felt that earthquake 100 times the one that we felt. But they survived, and the building survived unscathed. Not due to the strength of its steel and its stone, the concrete and the iron and the glass, but due to the ball that hangs on cords in its center and swings in the middle of this building when the outside of the building shakes. I find the physics of this building interesting, but mostly I'm kind of fascinated at the ability of architects and engineers to create such giant buildings that are architecturally sound and flexible, that can bend and swing and keep the people safe when the earth and the air throw their strongest invisible forces at these buildings. I grew up outside of Boston hearing stories about the nightmares of Boston's tallest building, which is the John Hancock Tower in the 1970s. Anyone know about the stories of the John Hancock Tower in the 1970s? There's like a handful of like New Englanders who maybe grew up with these horror stories or witnessed these horror stories. Among other terrors of this building, the 500-pound glass window panes were known to pop out of their frames and crash onto the sidewalks below when there were high winds when this building was first built. The tallest building in Boston. They also had to add additional steel bracing to the building, and they eventually created their own version of a tuned mass damper in that building, although it's much less glamorous and gold and cartoonish than the Taipei 101 building. They did this to counteract both the building's swaying and just the motion sickness of the people who occupied the high levels of that skyscraper. What is soft? Motion, air, life is strong. The buildings we construct with steel and concrete that try to scrape the very sky above us are no match for the air unless they know how to bend and sway. Survival comes not from rigidity, but from flexibility. And I want to tell a human story now, a story about the devastation of mental illness and surviving difficult loss. And so anyone who needs to specially care for themselves when hearing those kinds of stories, I want to let you know that that's what's coming. How many of you are familiar with the country duo, the Judds? The Judds? Yeah? A lot of us. The Judds were a mother-daughter duo, Naomi and Winona Judd, who made music together on and off for decades, starting in 1980. Actress Ashley Judd is the third famous Judd, in case you know her better. She's half-sister to Winona and the second daughter of Naomi. In 2022, Winona and Naomi were preparing for what they called the Judds' final tour, a chance to reunite, tour together once more for probably the last time, as mom, Naomi, was 76, and a tour calendar we know can be grueling for even a very young artist. But Naomi had wrestled with depression and anxiety and suicidality on and off for many decades. And Winona says she was incredibly excited about the tour, but just a few weeks before the tour was to begin, Naomi succumbed to her illness and died by suicide. And after deep reflection, Winona decided to go ahead with the tour anyway. And she gathered support and friends all around her to be able to make it through. A friend and colleague of mine who wasn't actually that familiar with their music thought that Winona's decision was incredibly courageous, and so she decided to buy tickets to this last weekend of the tour that happened about a year ago. And after the concert, she shared these words on Facebook. She wrote, "After a break, Winona hit the stage, and she looked like a terrified 4-year-old, barely moving. Her smile seemed forced. It was clear that she was in the middle of big stuff going on, and she said as much during the course of the show. Brandy Carlisle was joining her at this concert, and soon she was on stage with Winona and was a whirlwind of energy all over the stage, moving and dancing and jumping and pointing. To me, my friend writes, it looked like she was trying to counteract Winona's rigidity physically. My friend writes that she read later that Winona had been suffering from dizziness and vertigo on top of the deep grief, something that she has profound empathy for, especially following my friend's own bout of vertigo. And my friend writes, I don't know if that was what was going on physically that day or if it was simply all the emotion. She looked impaled in her own body, and yet she belted out those songs. She gave it her all. And as a human, I felt for her. This was the last weekend of the last tour of the Judds, a big part of Winona's identity for the last 40 years. In the course of the concert, my friend writes, Winona asked for and received help from her band, from her husband, the drummer, from Brandy. She said, I need help into the microphone as she stood in the center of the stage. And physically, people would come to her, would touch her, would stand by her. She said it was very hard to be public when you're going through something so big, but that there's nothing to do but go through it. She said that doing the concert anyway, that she had planned with her mother, was giving her life after a horrific death. She asked for love, and the audience poured it all over her. And still, she looked like nothing so much as an orphan up there holding on to anything that would steady her. What is vulnerable is resilient. Our human lives cause us to face typhoon-strength winds of loss and shake us to our core with change that registers well over a 7 on the Richter scale. Sometimes we imagine that we must stand firm, that we must become a rock in order to withstand the world. And yet the more rigid we are, the more we try to grasp at that which we think we can control, the less resilient we become. What is soft is strong. What doesn't bend breaks. Religious communities exist, at least in part, for us to practice what it means to be human. And in particular, for us to practice the kind of human living that we wish we could experience everywhere around the world. And like everywhere else in the world, this congregation is facing change. Some of its change we choose, our upcoming plans to renovate and restore our buildings, our work to throw open our arms to the world and seek to grow. And some of it is simply the change that comes with time. Reverend Hannah needing to move on to a new ministry that's right for her. Others in this community facing illnesses or loss, this upcoming election that will come and will dramatically change our lives. I am proud that much of the conversation here about how to change our physical space has focused on how we can become more flexible, how we can improve our accessibility and the possibilities for all of our spaces here in our buildings to serve multiple purposes to meet these not yet known needs of our next chapter. But we still have some challenging and important questions to answer together as we figure out how to prioritize the most important changes to make first, knowing that we can't make all the changes at once. And so I hope that many of you will join us this afternoon to add your voice to the conversation as we prepare to raise millions of dollars in the coming year to try to make real our dreams. Your voices matter, whether you've been here just a short amount of time or many, many years. And I hope that as a congregation, we are also able to be soft and flexible and human as we enter this time of grief and celebration around the ending of Reverend Hannah's ministry with us, and as we find our way forward together. The tallest skyscrapers in the world somehow know how to sway and to swing and to bend in order to withstand shakes from below and gales from left and right. Winona Judd chose to go through the horrors of grief on stage, with dizziness and devastation filling her body, but she knew to gather friends around her and to ask for help and to open her broken heart to the love of the hundreds of thousands of fans who were touched by her mother's presence on earth in the same way she was. Everything must change, sang John B. and George Benson before him. The only lasting truth is change, writes Octavia Butler. We may think we must be firm to withstand change, but even the sandstone and the hardwoods carry the memory of the water and the wind and the life within them. We may think that steel and stone is what makes us survive a devastating earthquake, but instead it's our ability to sway and to dance that gives us our life. We may think that grief should shut us down and close us off, that we must hide our vulnerability, but the courageous choice is to gather our friends around and to ask for help and to open our broken hearts. And in doing so, we find profound, heart-growing healing. Water is soft and fluid and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid and soft and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox, what is soft as strong. May it be so, and amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, You can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.